All right, you can see a theme going on here. We've got, we're doing, again, this is the IDSA Alliance, and we're talking about integrations, integrations that support a zero trust identity story. You've seen multi-factor, you've seen adaptive auth, you've seen privileged access management. You've seen a little bit of an insider threat with the thing from Okta and the LogRhythm and Netskope. So now SecureAuth integrating with Netskope and LogRhythm, so kind of a similar thing that you saw before. You're seeing it again, and the benefit here is you're seeing multiple integrations kind of performing some of these functions to support it. The slide here says the future is now. I'm going to say this again. These are integrations that are real. They are GA. The purpose behind this is really to support a zero trust, don't trust anybody, don't trust any device, and so forth, to support this zero trust story. Next, please. So this is the third of 6 sessions. So this is the adaptive access management for the enterprises with SecureAuth, Netskope, and LogRhythm. One more slide, and I will turn this over to Ian Barnett. Thank you, sir.
Morning, everyone. My name is Ian Barnett, Solutions Architect with SecureAuth. I think you guys have already met my 2 esteemed colleagues up here from the last session. But we're going to talk to you a little bit here about adaptive access control, access management, adaptive authentication for enterprises. Really looking at the way that we can tie various layers together, information from various sources, try to break down some of these silos between identity and the network side of things. So the idea being, right, we're never going to really trust that user session completely. We're going to do as many checks as we can of different pieces along the way, right? So whether that's fraud and risk, whether that's working with Netskope from a DLP perspective and a CASB, and being able to respond to changes based upon users' behavior as they take certain actions within the enterprise. And you can see these kind of 2 use cases. I don't know if we didn't really talk about it. If you go to the IDSA website, we actually have a list. I'm going to give a little plug here for IDSA. But we have a whole list of use cases that we're working together to define that kind of breaks down all these different pieces, talks about the interaction between the different layers and the different members, right? And again, these are things we've tried to do. They're out of the box. Some of them have never been tried before, except for the IDSA. But the idea is we are using, real features and functionality within these products to tie them together and to better leverage and increase your overall security posture. Go ahead and just build it out. So, right, you've seen this slide before in the previous 2. What we're talking about, we're acting as the access management piece, and then we're going to be integrating with the SIM here from LogRhythm, as well as the CASB DLP features of Netskope. Now that's from our perspective. You can see on the right, actually, there's some interaction going on between both Netskope and LogRhythm as well that we're leveraging.
All right, so briefly I'm going to give you a breakdown of what this looks like. Let me grab this little pointer here. All right, so if we start taking a look at some of the components, first off, we've got managed devices here. They have a client on them that's doing a forward proxy that's steering traffic. On-premise, we've got an Active Directory, so that's the source of truth in this particular example. We also have a LogRhythm that's on-premise. And then when we start taking a look at out in the cloud, we've got Netskope's cloud tenant, where we're steering traffic to. And then we've got SecureAuth, which is going to be doing some multi-factor authentication, looking at access, and making some decisions based upon various risk information that gets provided into that system. So when we start taking a look here, a few things. So one, we're taking Active Directory information and we're pushing that up into Netskope. Netskope's using that to create role-based access controls. So just leveraging groups to determine what should folks be able to do. That information is also being consumed over by SecureAuth. So that's how it's substantiating the user identities. And then the next thing we take a look at is we've got LogRhythm, which is going to be consuming Netskope's logs, just as we saw in the last presentation. So providing that rich contextual information where we can start making some decisions based upon whatever your organization's risk appetite is. And then when we take a look here, we also have SecureAuth going out to some cloud services that they have. You'll notice it's bi-directional. So here they've got various threat and risk data. Could be about IP reputations, could be specific to that user, could be when they fingerprinted the system, so what system was that end user on, what browser did they have, where were they located. So all that information gets stored and gets utilized when authorizing access. And then when we take a look here, one thing that you're going to see happening is we've got two things. Here's some of the API integrations that'll be happening. So first off, you've got LogRhythm that consumes that log data from Netskope. It does some analysis, and once that analysis is done, it's going to send that information. In this case, it's a risk profile. It's going to send over a risk rating over to SecureAuth. SecureAuth is going to use that risk rating to determine whether or not a user should have access to applications, or should we do a step-up or multi-factor authentication for the application. So this is all dynamic on the fly. The other thing that's happening is when LogRhythm comes in and starts calculating and munching that log data that it's getting, in this particular instance, it's going to run a smart response, and that smart response is going to do an API query over to core security, which actually moves users into different groups in Active Directory, and that's going to change the policies that are going to be applied to that user. So for example, we saw somebody doing something bad, or we deemed to be risky activity, great. Now let's go put them into a different group, and in this instance, we're actually going to block access. There's various things that we could have done. We could have done something very similar where we could have said, well, let's just restrict access. So for example, maybe I want you to be able to view, but I don't want you to download. Or maybe you're not on a trusted system, so I'm going to allow you to, I'm not going to allow you to upload because I have no clue what you might be uploading. So exfiltration, infiltration. And then on the last piece here, I think we got two more. 6, I talked about the managed devices. 7, this is just showing that we have sanctioned applications that have been enabled for a single sign-on. Point it one way. All right. And now we're going to look at the user traffic and that user traffic flow.
Which way are you going?
So we're going to be doing a, jeez.
You want that one?
No. All right. So
Just keep moving slides. Keep you on your toes.
you're going to see a couple things happening here. First off, we're going to go take a managed asset. We're going to go, so that this is going to be IDP initiated, by the way. So we're going to go log into SecureAuth, and then from there, we're going to go log into Salesforce, Salesforce being a sanctioned application. You're going to see that we're able to do that. And we're not going to be, there's not going to be a need to do multi-factor authentication. And then what I'll end up doing is I'm going to go and access a non-sanctioned application. In this instance, it's going to be Dropbox. I have a document that has been classified, and I'm looking for that metadata tag when it's going through the Netskope DLP engine. And since this document happens to be highly sensitive, what we'll end up doing is when those logs go and get sent over to LogRhythm, that's where the logic happens. LogRhythm is going to do a few things. Like I just talked about earlier when I was showing you the API calls. Those API calls will happen. So we're going to take a user, we're going to go move them into a different group based upon their behavior. And the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to force them to have to do multi-factor authentication. Sound good? All right. And here we go at the demo gods. Let's see where they're at today.
Everyone, moment of silence, please. Cross your fingers and toes.
All righty. If anybody wants to speak while I'm doing this, go for it.
I've already mic'd up. Come on.
All right, we have IP connectivity. So, like I said before, I'm going to log in to SecureAuth first. So, Identiverse 2.
So in this use case, Matt's logging in, and the user, after looking at the adaptive access rule set for the authentication, determines that this user does not need to be stepped up, right? So we're looking at the geo where the user's logging in from. We're looking to see if they're coming in from any anonymous networks, anonymous VPNs, compromised IP, looking at their risk score, the groups, their entitlements that they're belonging to, and based upon that, we've determined this user does not need any type of elevated authentication flows at this point. His logs in the secure portal, grants access. No, we don't have anything in our Salesforce instance, but a standard web federation flow into Salesforce. So now this is our user accessing an unsanctioned application. Little grassroots IT action. Maybe they want to send it to themselves and access it at home, or sending it to a third party that they're doing business with. But whatever the reason, it's not allowed.
It's highly sensitive, man.
Highly sensitive.
All right, cars. Click verify once. There, none left.
And this is Dropbox.
Yeah, exactly. Please click on those.
Did you know you're
This
a
is gonna be
robot?
the epic fail here.
Bus.
I'm out.
This takes a village.
Next. No.
Why didn't we have to do this last time?
Oh, there's one there.
Haven't seen any other cars? We're not robots, we swear.
Please also check the new images.
Who's not crossing their fingers for us? And that's why this system of two-factor authentication is terrible. Thanks, Dropbox.
Jeez. We'll just go into this one. I think that one still exists. How many Dropbox accounts do you have? A lot. Click verify once there, none left. 1, 2, 3. New image. What was that? Oh, am I not being patient? Probably.
No pun intended. It's a great way to eat
There's
time.
one in there. Click verify once there. I gotcha. Oh, bus.
It's a great ad for Dropbox at the moment.
Exactly. Alright, I don't see any more in there.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Oh!
We've only done this about 60 times this week alone, so this is a first.
Yeah. Gotta love it.
How are we doing? We got time. No pressure.
Not at all. Alrighty, see a car in there? Can't tell. Looks pretty green to me.
We can spot cars.
Wait, we're not there yet. No. No. All right, that's it. I'm just using a different account then.
Is that what got us into this trouble?
Probably. Well, you know what? The good thing is I've got the policy set up for cloud storage. We shall deviate for a moment. And I'm going to go and actually try.
We're going to improvise. We've got 4 minutes. Plus questions. No questions? Good. Any questions while we wait? The demo gods. Oh. I don't know what happened. We've been doing this demo for like 3 weeks. That never happened.
Yeah.
It probably won't work.
There it is. Yeah, so everything we're doing, all this is live, guys. None of this is like real time, as you can tell.
What was that, 16 seconds? I'm not asking to be facetious. I'm really asking because, you know, they say anything above 8 seconds, and it might be even shorter now, the user's going to throw the laptop against the wall, right? Which could be lost in business.
A lot of times it's not the service, it's the connectivity to the service. Right? Well, we're all on the same internet Wi-Fi in here, so there's a good chance. Network connection more than service. I don't know what changed.
Who knows? There we go. All right, files. Oh, thanks. All right, let's go upload that file.
Did you get stopped?
I did not. Nope.
So the SHEER Act, the way the demo is supposed to flow, while Matt works on this, is that the sheer act of uploading or downloading this document with the right meta tags in it triggers a violation policy within Netskope, right? And so that data then flows down from Netskope's cloud through their on-premise log parser and gets pushed into LogRhythm. LogRhythm then can aggregate this data set, right? For our demo purposes, it's a single violation triggers this, but obviously we can be way more nuanced and look at a lot of other factors, right? LogRhythm's got a great, holds on to data 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it has. You can set the threshold to be configurable. We took a very low tolerance approach for the purposes of the demo. So once that policy gets triggered, LogRhythm actually has a smart response, which is an event that gets launched. There's an alarm that shows up on the LogRhythm dashboard in the SOC, right, for this user. It says policy violation. and actually explains to the analyst what the problem is, right? It says the policy in Netskope that was violated and the actions that were automatically taken based upon the information that was flowing through the system. So as we kind of started at the beginning, that execution, that alert, that smart response is doing two things. It's putting the user in a restricted group, and it's also raising that user's risk score, right? And so that's done automatically without having to notify anyone. The alert is the notification, right? But it takes action automatically. There's no approval for that. At that point, a number of things happen. One, that group membership in Active Directory, that actually flows back into Netskope using their AD importer utility. So that user then gets picked up. They're in that new group, and by being placed in that group, they now have very limited access to applications and what they can do, right? But again, this is more of a nuanced conversation around Netskope. You can set that however you want, right? You could block them from doing anything, or you could just say, hey, they just lost access to HR, finance, what have you. Maybe they have access to email, and that's it. The raised risk score allows us to then look at that user when they come in and make that part of our adaptive authentication policy. Right, we can take a look at, so they might be coming from a great geo, they maybe have a great IP, we recognize the device, they have all the right entitlements, but this one piece says, you know what, we're just not sure what's going on with your account. We're gonna make you step up, right? And we can make them step up single time, multiple times. We can hard stop that user if that's what the policy dictates, right? And now we've locked down that user's identity. We've locked down what they have access to until that alert can be remediated, right? The organization, the security organization can look at that user, right? It might be something as simple as up top.
Times them special.
To Scott's point earlier, this was done maybe by a user that is malicious, or maybe by a user that just doesn't necessarily know that, yeah, you know what, Dropbox isn't necessarily a good thing to be uploading any files to, whether they're sensitive or not. So there's a number of ways that with our smart response, with LogRhythm smart responses, that you can respond. I mean, you can take the authoritarian sort of approach and just disable the user until you can confirm that, you know what, this user, they didn't realize that this is more of a training issue, versus, hey, this user was trying to go rogue or was trying to do something that they shouldn't have been doing. So to the alarm.
And so hopefully this alarm, if everything flows as correctly, we've got a little time lag as
actually,
all the...
would you go to the dashboard real quick? I do want to
Yes.
mention how we kind of take some logic into this. If you were in the previous demo, then you saw more on the alarm side. But this is how we necessarily take logic with the Netskope, with our Netskope integration. I mean, and this isn't necessarily just Netskope. Everything that we, all of the logs that we have that we're collecting, we collect virtually everything under the sun. If it has an IP address, if it creates logs, we'll be able to ingest it and take it from that raw log format, as you can see here, into the different metadata fields. So that in itself takes a lot of the workload out of creating alarms, out of creating reports, out of being able to make that data usable for your environment. So when Netskope sees an unusual activity, like someone uploading a sensitive document to Dropbox, it's very easy to create an alarm saying, hey, this is outside of the character of this user based off of trending, based off of the Netskope rules, and create an alarm against that.
So you can see we've got our new alarm popped up, right? Someone can look over here on the right-hand side at the inspector for that alarm, do the analysis, find out what went wrong, why this was triggered, who the user was, all that, the various details that can flow through the system, right? And happens to be us that we're up here standing with LogRhythm, but again, this is fairly agnostic across the applications they integrate with. But we think it's a great way to showcase how you can take action when these things happen, right? How to be proactive and not always have to wait for remediation, wait a week till you find out something bad's happening in your network. And now it's time. And now we're over. Almost perfect.
I'll show the other piece now.
Oh, we're over.
Yeah, there's Q&A time, isn't there?
That was Q&A time. Anyway, we'll be in the back if you guys have specific questions. Thank you.
So the guys will be at the back to answer questions for that, and we'll continue in a few minutes with the next session from Gemalto.